Hello everyone. First of all, let me give you all a warm welcome to the Zoological Society of Assam. Today, on behalf of the part of the initiative taken up by the Zoological Society of Assam, I am here to discuss about Lamarckism, which is an important topic of evolutionary biology. And I believe that this lecture will be helpful for the undergraduate students of zoology. Before starting the lecture, let us first consider the learning outcomes. So firstly, we'll study about Lamarckism. Next, we will see the postulates of Lamarckism like the new needs, acquisition of new characters, which is acquired by two ways, that is use and disuse, and effect of the environment. Then inheritance of acquired characters. Then we will see the evidences which were in support of Lamarckism, where we will discuss various examples. Then we will also discuss the criticism of Lamarckism, and lastly we will study why Lamarckism is important. So let's start with Lamarckism. Lamarckism is also known as the theory of inheritance of acquired characters. It was proposed by Jean-Baptiste Pierre Antoine de Monnet Chevalier de Lamarck. He published the theory in the book Philosophie zoologique in the year 1809. Now there is an interesting fact about this year. It's that in the same year Charles Robert Darwin was born. He is famously known for his theory of natural selection or Darwinism. And later, after 50 years, he published his own book, The Origin of Species by Natural Selection. Now let's see the definition of Lamarckism. So the changes in structure or function of any organ acquired during the lifetime of an individual in response to changes in the surrounding environment are inherited by its offspring and keep on adding up over a period of time. These changes lead to the origin of new species. So according to Lamarckism, whatever the traits or the characters an organism acquires during its lifetime are inherited by the offsprings of its next generation, and then these traits keeps on adding up over a period of time, and ultimately it leads to the origin of a new species. Now let's talk about the postulates of Lamarckism. The first postulate is new needs. Changes in the environment create new needs in living organisms for better adaptation to the changed environment. For the fulfillment of the new needs, the organisms have to put in special efforts which lead to a change in the habits or behavior. This results in the formation of new organ or a part in the body, and if the need continues, that organ or part continues to grow. So, according to Lamarckism, whenever there is any change in the environment, a new need will trigger in the organism and to adapt to these changes. And for fulfillment of that need, there will be changes in the habits or behavior of the organism, and this will result in the formation of new organ or body parts. And if the new need continues to grow, that particular organ or body part will also continue to grow. The second postulate of Lamarckism is acquisition of new characters. This is acquired by two ways. Number one, by use and disuse. The new habits involve greater use of certain organs to meet the new needs, and it keeps them functional and makes them stronger, larger, and more efficient. permanent disuse of these organs makes them reduced and finally leads to degeneration. So, according to Lamarck, the organs which are used continuously becomes well developed and they enlarge in size. But permanent disuse of these organs makes them reduced and finally it leads to degeneration. And after many generations, they may be completely lost. So second is the effect of environment. Changes in temperature, light, medium, food, etc. influence the functioning and behavior of living beings and introduce changes in their structure. Due to direct or indirect influence of the environment, the organism acquire certain new characters. So according to Lamarckism, environment plays an important role in influencing the organisms. The living organisms react to the external conditions and they become modified in response to the changes in the environment. And the change in the habits initiate the formation of new organs, or some modifications may be seen in the existing organs. The third postulate is inheritance of acquired characters. The changes which take place in the body of the animals during their lifetime due to use and disuse or direct and indirect environmental effects are known as acquired characters. These characters are preserved by the animals and are inherited to the next generation. In every generation, some new characters were acquired or the older ones keep on increasing or improving. As a result, after many generations, the species gets modified into a new one. So this is basically the definition of Lamarckism which we studied earlier. Now let's talk about the evidences postulated in favor of Lamarckism. The first evidence is evolution of long neck in giraffe. According to Lamarck, giraffes have evolved from some deer-like ancestors who had short neck and forelimbs, and they grazed on grass. As the climate of this area gradually became arid and changed into a desert, its rich vegetation was gradually replaced by a few high trees. Thus, leaves of these high trees were the only food available to the ancestors of giraffe, and for obtaining their food from the tall trees, they had to continuously stretch their neck and forelegs, which resulted in gradual elongation of neck and forelimbs. The increase was transmitted to the members of next generation, in which further elongation occurred due to similar efforts, which in due course of time resulted in the present-day long-necked giraffe, which have 7 neck vertebrae and each one is over 10 inches long. Now this is the picture representing the evolution of long neck in giraffe. So you can see that the ancestors of giraffe were deer-like animals with short neck and forelimbs, and they grazed on grass. You can see it in figure A. Now as the climatic conditions changed, the grasses were replaced with tall trees. And now the only source of food for them were the leaves of these trees. So in order to reach to the leaves of these trees, they had to continuously stretch their neck and the forelimbs. And because of continuous stretching, the length of the neck and forelimbs have increased. And this trait has passed on to the next generations. You can see in figure B, C and D. The length of the neck and forelimbs have gradually increased. And finally, the present day giraffe was evolved with a very long neck and forelimbs, which is represented in figure E. So this was the evolution of long neck in giraffe according to Lamarck. The second evidence is the evolution of snakes. According to Lamarck, the ancestors of snakes were limbed and lizard-like, which lived in thick jungles. Out of fear of mammals, which were more powerful, the snake's ancestors started creeping on jungle floor and living in narrow crevices or burrows. For creeping among the vegetation or burrowing in the narrow crevices, they stretched their body, which gradually became elongated. The legs, which were of no use but proved to be a hindrance in creeping and burrowing, gradually disappeared. So this is the picture showing the evolution of snake from lizard. You can see here that the ancestors of snakes were limbed and lizard-like. And for creeping among the vegetation in the narrow crevices, they had to stretch their body, which gradually became elongated. And since the limbs were of no use and were a hindrance in creeping and burrowing, they gradually disappeared, and it led to the evolution of snakes. The next evidence is the evolution of aquatic birds. According to Lamarck, aquatic birds like duck, swans, and geese have arisen from terrestrial ancestor by developing web between the toes for wading in water. This is also an example of continuous use. Web developed because the ancestral forms had to spread their toes and stretch the skin between them to rest on the water. Also, the size of the wings were reduced due to their continuous disuse. So this is the picture showing the development of web toe in aquatic birds. You can see the development of web has taken place between the toes so that the bird can rest on the water. Another evidence is the evolution of horse and deer. According to Lamarck, ancestors of modern horses lived in soft ground in jungles. When they were replaced by dry grassy plains, the horses and deer had to graze on hard grass and had to walk on dry land. These changes in habit led to the change in molars and premolars, also reduction in the number of digits and lengthening of the legs. The foot posture gradually changed to unguligrade, which was suited for swift running over hard ground. Now this is the picture showing the evolution of horse. You can see in the modern horse only the middle digit have increased in length while the other digits have reduced in size. Also the molar teeth have gradually evolved in case of the modern horse. Now let's talk about some other examples postulated in favor of Lamarckism, like clasping birds through constant perching on the twigs or branches of the trees have developed sharp and curved digits. Eyes are reduced in moles because they live underground. Then the biceps muscles in the right arm of blacksmith are more developed because of the continuous use of this arm. Muscles of pinna are reduced in mass but are well developed and functional in rabbit, dog, elephant, etc. because they live in jungles and use their pinna to collect sound waves from the surrounding. Flightless birds, for example, kiwi from New Zealand, ostrich from Africa, and emu from Australia, are believed to have descended from flying birds. When they first reached New Zealand, they were able to fly. On settling there, they did not find any need to fly as there were no enemies on land and there was plenty of food. In due course of time, they lost their ability to fly and accordingly wings got degenerated. So these were the various examples which were in support of Lamarckism. Now let's discuss the criticism of Lamarckism. We all know that Lamarck postulated that animals and plants have a tendency to increase in size. But various other scientists have criticized this postulation because many times evolution have shown reduction in size. Here we see some examples, like in angiosperms the trees are primitive and shrubs, herbs and grasses have evolved later and are more advanced. Also, many ferns and conifers which became extinct were gigantic trees, and the more highly evolved flowering plants are much smaller in size. The next is internal arch. So Lamarck suggested that new structures or organs results from new needs. But this appears to be illogical, because if the development of new organ or structure depends upon the desire, every human being who desires to fly should develop wings, but this does not occur. Next is use and disuse. Lamarckian principle suggesting that organs will develop due to use and degenerate due to disuse appears to be correct as far as growth for an organ within the lifetime of an individual is concerned. For example, it is commonly observed fact that muscles develop when they are put to use. However, the heart, which is put to use constantly during the lifetime of an organism, has retained its size generation after generation. The next is the inheritance of acquired characters. Now, this principle is also contradicted through various observations and experiments. For example, August Weismann, he was a German scientist. He performed an experiment to see if the characters disappear due to disuse. In his experiment, he cut the tails of rats for about 20 generations to see if this has any effect on the tail length of the coming generations. And he measured the tail length of offsprings for about 20 successive generations, but he found that the offsprings with shorter tail were never born. It means the acquired character was not inherited. Another experiment was also performed by Pavlov. He was a Russian physiologist. In his experiment, he trained dogs to come to food on hearing the bell. So, in his experiment, when the dog was served with food, Pavlov used to ring the bell. So it was the bell followed by the food. So the bell became a stimulus for the dog to get the food. After months of training, he just rang the bell and did not give any food to the dog. But he found out that the gastric juice was already secreted. So the bell was a stimulus that the food is coming, and in anticipation, the animal had already started producing the digestive juices. Next, when the trained dog gave birth to young ones, all those young ones had to be retrained. That is, the training was not inherited. So, the learning that the dog had received was not acquired by its offsprings. But according to Lamarck, that character should have been passed on to the next generation, but this did not happen. And there were several other criticisms of Lamarckism, like piercing of ears and nostrils in Indian women has been continued as a tradition from centuries, but their progeny do not show any trace of holes in the ears and nostrils. The Chinese people like to keep the feet of their women smaller, hence all Chinese girls are made to wear iron shoes, but newborn babies have their feet normal in size. Also, the theory of continuity of germplasm proposed by August Weismann was a hard blow to Lamarck's theory of inheritance of acquired characters. According to germplasm theory, each organism has two types of cells, known as germ cells and somatic cells. The environment and use and disuse of organs affect somatic cells only. This means acquired characters are restricted to the somatic cells alone and do not influence germ cells. As such, this cannot be inherited. Now let's see the basic flaw of Lamarck. So the basic flaw of Lamarck was that he could not differentiate between germplasm and somatoplasm. He believed that all acquired characters are inheritable, whereas the fact is that characters or changes that occur only in the germ cells are inherited. Lastly, let's see why Lamarckism is important. Although Lamarck's views on evolutionary mechanism are outmoded today, Lamarck still occupies a very important place in the history of evolutionary thoughts because he was the first evolutionist to conclude that evolution is a general fact covering all forms of life. Lamarck also provided detailed investigations of fossils and living invertebrates. He introduced the words invertebrates and vertebrates and emphasized distinction between them. Moreover, Lamarck arranged all living creatures of past and present in one broad line or staircase, leading uphill to the primates and the highest being man. The sequence of arranged animals in the presumptive staircase of Lamarck is the same as is followed today. So with this I have come to the end of my lecture, and here I have suggested a few books. You can go through them for more information. And here is my email ID. You can contact me for any queries. So thank you very much for your time and wish you all the best.